Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, So Grow Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. So trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of So Grow Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast, which is dedicated to nonprofit leaders who are passionate about making a difference. I'm your host, Haley Cooper, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on a journey of growth, inspiration, and transformation. At Lead with Heart, we believe that leading with heart means embracing empathy, compassion, and authenticity in every aspect of our work. It's about putting people first, fostering genuine connections, and creating a positive impact that goes beyond numbers and metrics. In the nonprofit world, it can often feel like we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. The challenges are immense, and the road can be lonely. But here, you're not alone. This podcast is a community where we support each other, share our stories, and learn together. Each episode will dive into personal and professional development topics tailored specifically for nonprofit leaders. From innovative fundraising strategies and effective team management to self-care practices and leadership insights, we're here to provide you with practical strategies that you can apply to your life and work. My goal is to empower you, elevate your leadership, and engage your heart in all that you do. I want to help you navigate the unique challenges of the nonprofit sector with confidence and resilience, so you can continue to create meaningful change in the world. So whether you're driving to a meeting, taking a break, or winding down for the day, tune in and join us on this journey. Together we'll discover what it truly means to lead with heart. Thank you for being here. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. This is your host, Haley Cooper, and I am so excited to have Frank Velásquez Jr. on the podcast. We met over a year ago at the Cultivate conference in San Diego, and he is just an amazing person, and I can't wait for you to get to know him and learn more about his work. He is a storyteller extraordinaire, social justice warrior, and master of relationships. In the relentless pursuit of racial and gender equity, Frank's warmth brings folks together to talk through the tough stuff, and he does this through his company, Florida Hood. And whether he's delivering a keynote on leadership language or equity, he's chatting one-on-one with a close friend or new connection, his real talk energy remains powerful and generous, and you're going to see that through our conversation. Because here's the thing, to Frank, each person's story matters and connects like essential ingredients in a rich and flavorful gumbo. As the founder of Florida Hood and the visionary behind the Ascending Leaders in Colorship program, Frank forges pathways for peeps of color to step into their power authentically, courageously, and with unapologetic joy. Well, welcome to the podcast, Frank.
Well, thanks for having me, Haley. And yes, I can't believe it's been well over a year now since I first met you.
I know. We went to dinner at that little cute camping place.
Yep.
And yeah, we have so many connections now, which is awesome. I think it's just nonprofits are a small world.
They can't be.
I know you recently stepped out full-time with Florida Hood. So Can you tell me a little bit more about how you came up with the name and what's your vision behind this movement?
Yeah, so For the Hood, the name isn't as exciting as it should be. And I'll go through that very quickly. It's almost not even connected to the story, but it's a good story. I had a personalized license plate back in 21, maybe it was 22. No, it had to be 21. And I got into a car wreck. And in the process of getting a new license plate, I was like, okay, well, what do I want to have this license plate to be? And I was already doing work around equity issues, race and stuff. And For the Hood just fit on my license plate. It was 7 characters. And when it came time to name my business, which was a year later, I was like, it has to be For the Hood, because I would get so many compliments about my truck, the license plate, and saying, oh my gosh, Frank, that's you. And that's when I knew it had to be my business. And really, the business just focuses on just what, like the license plate says, it's doing work for the hood, doing work in the hood with people from the hood. And when I say hood, I'm saying neighborhood. I shorten it so it's a little colloquial, but I just love it. And the work really does center around racial and gender equity issues, really searching for equity amongst all marginalized groups and doing the work and having people from these communities do the work. So that's how I came up with the name. I didn't want to name it after myself. I really wanted to get people to know that this is a communal effort, a community effort. And I think that's how it birthed. And I was doing a lot of stuff prior to that, but bringing it all together through the practice of doing presentations across the nation, that's when I knew I needed to have the business, because I wanted something that would lend credibility to work that I was already doing.
Yeah, I love that. And if anyone is in Arizona, they'll be seeing you driving around with
my red truck.
Yes. There you go. Well, you have worked in the nonprofit sector, so choosing to really niche down in your Ascending Leaders program and the services that you offer, what was the gap that you saw or the challenges that you saw nonprofits facing to really niche down in this area?
Well, I can probably answer that in 2 ways. So one, a lot of it was personal experience, and then the other one would be around storytelling. So let me start with the storytelling, and then I'll tell you about the first thing that I said. So there is a need for nonprofits to tell their stories. And I came up with this really cool concept of how to tell an organization's story, and it's through the 5 stages of story arc. And once I landed on that, and if you don't know what the 5 stages are, it's exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and the resolution. I started to tie into the elements of exposition that would be like the populations that you work with. The rising action would be the problem and how is it getting worse. The climax would be the nonprofit and the work that they're doing in the community to help turn those negative things around. And then the falling action was simply, well, how are you doing? Like what programs, da-da-da. And then resolution is just the way it sounds. Well, what are your outcomes? Is it successful what you're doing? I wrote our organizational story that way, and our funding increased dramatically. I think when I started at the organization, it was maybe $750,000 a year the year before I started. By the time I left 3 years later, we were almost at 1.5 million. So almost being able to double it. And I really do believe it was through the strength of storytelling. In regards to the flagship program, as you mentioned, Ascending Leaders in Color, that was a lot of my own experiences. So I just told you about this nonprofit that I was the CEO of. Well, I separated from that organization in the summer of 2020, and I'll know what was happening summer of 2020. It was a lot. The pandemic, and then the murders of George Floyd, Taylor and Aubrey were all happening. And it really caused this reflection point on my end. I started to think about my time at that nonprofit. Was there for 3 years. I had never been a CEO before. I had never worked in nonprofits before. This is 2017. I realized when I left that I had never been my authentic self when I was there. And it was simply, I think, largely because I didn't want to mess up. But the other part of it was I do feel the higher we move into leadership roles, the wider the space gets. It's definitely more male-centered. And I am not, well, I'm a male, but I'm not a white person. And I started to see those gaps of I didn't have people who looked like me that could be my mentors, that I could just reach out to, because the end of my tenure at that organization, it wasn't the best. And not that it was horrible. There was just a lot of stuff going on with the pandemic where decisions had to be made or suggestions had to be made. But I didn't have anybody to bounce ideas off of who looked like me or might have been going through similar struggles. So that's what birthed Ascending Leaders in Color was I wanted to create a space in this. Initially, I created a space for people of color. I call it the 3 R's, where they could be authentically real, with one another. They can reconnect with other leaders of color because there was a lot of like misconnections or disconnections. And then number 3 is that they could reclaim every part of who they are as leaders, because that is what makes us us. There's things that are absolutely wonderful about ourselves that we are expected to shed the higher we rise into leadership. And even talking to you as a woman, you can relate to some of these things where there's definitely a tilt toward a certain group. But what I've done as I've continued through the Ascending Leaders in Color program is I did launch my first white affinity group. And this was in October of last year, and they just finished in June. And I ran it in parallel with another cohort of color. And that I loved, because I call it healing separately to lead collectively. And what that simply means is that we have healing to do. Our allies have healing to do. People of color have healing to do. But I advocate for separate spaces because the origins of the healing are very different. For people of color, it's really coming from the lens of being oppressed and not having spaces for ourselves. And then for white folks, it was really, and this is what people have told me, white folks have told me, a lot of it is, and as allies, they still carry a great weight of shame, a great weight of guilt, and getting them into a space where they feel comfortable to work through that together, because they're all on different levels, it's just ended up being a beautiful thing. And then the goal is then at the end of the program, you have them all come together and start leading collectively. And I was able to complete this group for the first time, as I mentioned, in June. And it was an amazing journey for them. It was really cool to kind of get to that last meeting, bring them back all together and ask them what they learned. That's how the flagship program, Ascending Leaders in Color, came out, born out of my experiences and just wanting to leave a legacy for people who look like me that are younger than me as they're coming up into their leadership opportunities.
Yeah, that's amazing that you have used your own experiences and created that community. And when you were talking about the 3 R's, I know we talked about off screen yesterday about how you, for each of these groups, make circle agreements. Is that what it's called?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So talk a little bit more about what that looks like, because I think that's important, because yes, you establish some of the guidelines, but then you leave it up to the group to establish the rest of them. So you're getting that buy-in into how people show up. So can you talk a little bit about what inspired you to start these circle of agreements and how they've come to fruition?
Oh, great question. So years ago, when I lived in Las Vegas, I'm a skilled trainer. So I've done large group facilitation, small group facilitation. When I worked at the college, I led a small book club out on my campus. And so leading conversations with small groups has always been in my wheelhouse. I ended up working at an organization. This was after I left that nonprofit, picked up like a part-time role at an organization called Boys to Men Tucson. And they used this model called a restorative circle model. And so the things that I was already doing on my own, there was a lot of similarities, but once I knew what it was called, restorative circle model, and the practices behind it, which includes circle agreements, that's when things took off. And I was like, oh, wow, this is exactly what I need to do. So really, circle agreements are part of the restorative circle process. And really, it's just a space where you can be you, but you have to create the environment for that, which includes circle agreements. And so for Ascending Leaders, that was immediately what I knew I needed to do. There's only 10 people per group, and that's done by intention, is that I want to make sure that it remains intimate for each of the groups. And first meeting, they establish the circle agreements. And as you said, I do a starting point. I start with 4, listen from the heart, speak from the heart, trust the process, and say just enough. Trust the process. It's going to be a journey for them. So that's pretty self-explanatory. We're going to go into spaces, areas that maybe you haven't thought about in a while. Say just enough. That's really for the extroverts who like to talk a lot. You say just enough. That way others have an opportunity. And it is for the introverts too, because we want them to say more. And again, we provide this environment for that. But it's those first 2, listen from the heart and speak from the heart, that I feel are super critical. And so speaking from the heart, these are your experiences. You use I statements, all of those pieces. There's no judgment because you're speaking from your heart. And once everybody knows that, and especially when you're not speaking, you're listening. And we should be listening from the heart. And so those are the 4 starter ones that I do. But again, because I want the Ascending Leader cohort I do two things. One, we create these circle agreements, but I also have them come up with the name. The name is really easy. Just come up with the name to name your group. That solidifies, I think, the group. It's like, oh, we're ALC double vision, we're ALC solos. But the other half is what we said is they finish those agreements. Every time we meet, and those agreements could include be curious, be open-minded, be open-hearted, I'm trying to think of all the ones, ask for clarity, be courageous, Vegas rules, the confidentialities, be respectful, have fun. I had one group say things like, it is okay to curse. And so they get to create their agreements, so they own it. So not only is the name solidifying them, the agreement solidify them. And it does create a container for them to have really tough conversations, because even though they may all be people of color, we all have different experiences. Like English is my first language because my parents had been assimilated. And so they wanted to make sure that their kids, oh, you got to learn English. And there's others that Spanish is their first language. Or we have Black folks, we have Indigenous folks, we have Filipino folks. So we all come from different walks. We all have different experiences. Yes, we have a shared experience of being people of color, but having these circle agreements allows us to have almost like a no judgment zone and just the ability to speak unfiltered without feeling watched, gazed upon, all of those things. It's such a refreshing feeling to have that. So that's why circle agreements play such a large role, because every time we meet, that's the first thing we look at is those agreements. Are we still okay with these agreements? And it does help set the stage to have the tough conversation.
Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location, so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs. Helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so important, like in the world of filters and the ability to literally change your face, right? Or asking, like, I think it's so important to have those spaces where we can show up as ourselves, because being able to be safe and express ourselves allows us to show up bravely and courageously in other spaces. And you talked about this idea of restorative circle model. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah. So if it was in person, and mind you, I've done these virtually, but let's say we were in person, we literally sit in a circle. So we have chairs, I arrange them in a circle. What that does is it pretty much immediately removes the feeling of hierarchy. So even when we had the book club, when I ran the book club at the community college I was at, there was intent to ensure that titles were out the window, because we had deans in our circle, we had counselors in our circle, program managers, we came from all walks of life. So what the restorative circle practice does is that through the use of a circle, it really does help us center, and that there's no hierarchical components. Definitely the circle agreements are a way to establish how the process looks. One other piece, I don't really use this, but I think I definitely, as a guided facilitator, I definitely watch for it, is some will have like a talking stick. Well, if you're holding that, only that person can talk. I've not had to use an actual talking stick in my circles. I think it's pretty much understood based on what the agreements look like that there's zero crossover talk. Certainly don't want them to talk in a line in a chronological order, but I do want them to make sure that they have that ability to understand that they can interact. I'm trying to think of some of the other components. I think I've already hit on them. It's the circle agreements, the talking stick. I think some of the other pieces are just simply, again, framing how you have the conversation, no over talk, being respectful, creating certain elements that allow to have this conversation. Again, doesn't necessarily need to be like a guided facilitator, but in my group, I am that person because I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to talk, which is why I cap it at 10 people, is to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to have a role in the conversation that we're going over. And I probably should have said this as well, Haley. In the Ascending Leaders in Color program, we have topics. And so some of the topics might be microaggressions, code switching, the bias of professionalism. I give them short videos and short articles to read prior to us meeting. And then that's when I have the ability to ask them 3 base questions. What resonated from the articles and the videos? I give them about an hour to have that conversation. When it comes to its natural close, my next question is, okay, well, what are your takeaways from the conversation, not from the articles and videos, but our conversation? So somebody might say, oh, when Haley mentioned that about this, oh my gosh, I never really thought of it like that. And then the last question, because some of the topics really evoke like memories from childhood sometimes where they'll cry, they'll shut down. I know I don't have the ability to snap them out of it, but I can acknowledge it. And I can, so the last question's around joy. I say, look, I know some of the topic was harder for some of us. I know I can't control that, but I would like you to start thinking about ways to recenter your joy. And then I just ask them, all right, so what are you going to do to recenter your joy as we exit out of the circle? And they'll be like, oh, I'm going to go have lunch with my partner. I'm going to go see a movie. And again, this is just all an ability we have to talk about the hard stuff, but it's not just like a bitch session. It really is, all right, now we know this is what it is. Now, how can we work together to move through it, to navigate through it, to help ourselves move up into these leadership roles?
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you validate the experience instead of avoiding it, right? You're validating their experience, you're validating their feelings, and that helps people be able to move through those emotions and feel that seen and heard. And sometimes it's like, I hear you, like I'm here for you. And your work, like you said, requires navigating tough conversations around race, gender, and opportunity. Mm-hmm. What strategies do you use to foster trust and keep people engaged when the topics get uncomfortable?
That's such a good question, Haley. I just got off a call before you and it's an organization, it's a corporation, and they want to have these conversations. They really do, which is why they brought me on. And it's also not a desire, but an understanding of, well, we can't hit people over the head too hard because then they're going to shut down, which I completely understand when we live in a very divisive climate right now. And so to answer your question, I can think of one particular instance, and I won't go too wordy into it, but it was the first meeting post-inauguration. I was facilitating my group. I felt it was necessary to acknowledge the elephant in the room. And I said, all right, before we start, I just if you want to talk about how you're feeling, I'm going to give you space. And the majority of the group shared what they felt. I have no expectation that everybody has the same leanings. And so one person in the group was like, he just says, yeah, he goes, y'all are being so divisive. And this is why I didn't want to come to the circle today. I had a feeling like this was going to happen. And he talked. And as he was talking, I'm there as a facilitator. I'm like, okay, well, I don't want this to go sideways. And so he happened to be sitting, I'm glad we had the conversation, Haley. He happened to be sitting next to the circle agreements. And that was my North Star. So as he was expressing, rightfully so, his feelings, and he says, look, I didn't vote for that person, but this is what I feel. And I don't feel like this is a safe space anymore for me. After he was done talking, I pointed him to the circle. Well, I pointed everybody to the circle agreements, and they all look at it. And I said, I want us to focus on the first two, listening from the heart and speaking from the heart. And I told him, and to the group, but to him as well, I said, this space has been created to have these unfiltered conversations where we can be raw, because if we go out into the real world, maybe we work in spaces where it leans a certain way and we don't have that opportunity to have that conversation. Here we can do it. So I said, that's not going to change. I said, and that's where they're speaking from the heart. And I looked at him and I said, and how you just spoke from your heart. And I said, and then that lends itself to the second part, the listening. I said, we listened, or I listened to you from my heart as you were expressing what you were saying, and just reminded him, but again, more in a general sense of that's why listening from the heart is important too, because what he said was hard, what they said was hard, But we have to have that space to say the hard things so that it's less about agreeing to disagree, but more about feeling valued, heard, and seen. And I think that was the biggest takeaway post conversation. In the immediate, after that conversation happened, was like, oh, okay, yeah, he felt better. And I'll just close with this. He felt at the end, he said, because when we asked that question, what are your takeaways? He was like, this was my favorite session. He goes, I honestly thought that you, meaning the people in the group, were going to shut him down, were going to judge him. And he said he didn't feel that at all. He felt listened to, he felt valued, he felt seen. And that was my goal. And to be in that moment, and I'm not going to lie, it was a little scary because I was like, oh my God, I was like, cannot let this go sideways. But that's where you trust yourself and trust your instincts. And like I said, the circle agreements literally were over his right shoulder. And I was like, there it is. Let's point to that. So just those simple reminders of listening from the heart, speaking them from the heart, I really do feel can help us maneuver through the hard stuff. And not going to be 100% great. It will not be 100% great. But I feel if we can inch closer to it, we're inching in the right direction versus what I feel like certain leaders are trying to do and separate us. We need to fight and continue to bring ourselves together versus being torn apart.
Hey there, podcast family. If you're like me and deeply committed to improving your leadership skills and fostering better connections with your team, I've got something truly amazing to share with you. I'm proud to introduce the EMC Masterclass, something I talk about often as a certified trainer. It's an incredible program developed by the renowned Dr. Lola Gershfeld, an organizational psychologist and corporate emotional connection expert. You might remember her from a podcast episode where she shared invaluable insights into the world of emotional connection. Dr. Gershfeld's EMC Leaders courses are designed for anyone working with people, whether you're a manager, supervisor, team leader, educator, coach, mentor, or a team member. This program is truly for everyone looking to enhance their communication and collaboration skills to raise more revenue for their mission. Now, let me tell you why the EMC Masterclass is a game changer. Dr. Gershfeld's groundbreaking emotional connection process has been integrated into top universities' curriculum and recognized by international organizations like ICF, HRCI, and SHRM. Humans are wired to seek emotional safety, and when we feel safe, we're more likely to take risks, share innovative ideas, and collaborate effectively. The EMC process is the catalyst for creating that emotional safety within your team. The virtual EMC Masterclass consists of 8 modules with 4 hours of expertly recorded material, 13 quizzes to reinforce your learning, and a workbook filled with activities for offline practice and something I still refer to daily. Ready to become an emotional connection master? Dr. Gershfeld is offering an exclusive detail for our podcast listeners. Use the code LEADWITHHEART to enjoy a generous 10% discount on the EMC Masterclass. Head over to emcleaders.com and enroll in the EMC Masterclass today.
Yeah, and I think, especially in leadership, and I feel like that is happening more and more today, where there is that divisiveness and there is that separation in leadership, whether through power dynamics or feeling alone, like you said earlier, of there is no one like me in this position. How do I get support? So how do you encourage these leaders to bridge the gap and close the divide?
Yeah, so by virtue of design for ascending leaders in color specifically, is obviously the 10 in the group, they are immediately connected. What the goal has been is that I connect each of these groups when they complete to all the ones prior who had completed. So now you're creating this interconnected web of folks who've had the shared experience, if you think like a sorority or fraternity, a shared experience of having gone through ascending leaders in color, and then they come out brothers and sisters in a way that they wouldn't have connected before. My favorite part, Haley, is when I go out into the community and I'll see people who've gone through, which now is almost 70 people have gone through ascending leaders. And they're like your little soldiers out there. They're the ones that have gone through it, the experience. And once I said, oh, did you know that so-and-so went through ALC? They're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. And now they immediately have a connection and a shared experience and hopefully an ability to, again, move up in leadership. Because to me, that's the biggest goal. I really look at For the Hood through the lens of generational wealth and closing the gap and increasing our generational wealth. And that really is through being authentic to who you are, leading with more authenticity, courage, and joy, that you can then move into these spaces of leadership, being you.
Yeah. And when you're talking about showing up authentically, obviously you have a container where people can do that. But how do you encourage people to go beyond the walls of the virtual room of the container to carry that into the real world and lead authentically?
It's not easy. So I was very intentional. When I talk about ascending leaders in color, I always say the goal is empowering leaders to lead with more authenticity, courage, and joy. Because quite honestly, we can't do those things. There's dominant groups all around us. We have very few spaces where we can be our full authentic selves. It's a fallacy to be that unless you're an entrepreneur, unless you have an ability to just be in your space. I've gone through this, and I'm not saying that everybody shares my experiences, but there's been enough folks that we understand that we know we can't be our full authentic selves. However, what I try to do through the program is to build that resilience and build that network to be more authentic, to be more courageous, and to be more joyful. And so I'll give you one example of how that actually occurred. A woman was promoted internally. She doesn't have a college education, and this was at a nonprofit. Her initial thought before the program, she said, was, all right, well, I don't have a college education. So she got the promotion. There was like a range in salary. She said she would have typically gone to the lower end and just eliminating herself from any possibility of advocating for a higher salary. And she said because of the program, she felt empowered. She says, no, I know my worth. I know what I've done. She wrote out a list of things, of all the things that she'd accomplished, advocated for the middle range. I might have advocated for a little bit higher, but she advocated for the middle range and she got it. And for her to specifically say the program helped her get to that point, that's where I say it's how you move beyond the walls. Another person had a really tough heart-to-heart conversation with leadership at the corporation she worked at. We had just come out of the circle, or she had just finished reading the articles that morning, has this conversation with leadership, and they start down a path of like, oh, we love you for blah, blah, blah. And she was like, I don't want to hear that anymore. And she advocated and said, I need to know why these things are happening and blah, 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 was really advocating for herself. And she came out of that. And I remember at one point during the conversation with the group, she was disappointed in herself because she said, I wish I would have said more. And she says, but it's my job. And I looked at her and I said, that's always been the goal. You said things that you hadn't said before. The goal is not to get you fired. The goal is for you to start advocating, but you know how far you can push. That is growth in and of itself. And she started to cry. And I was glad she saw that as be proud of yourself. You said things you had never said before. Yeah, you stopped short, but it's your job. Or you're starting to know where that stopping point is. Because I don't want her to get fired. And I want her to advocate for herself. She found that medium where she could do that. I guarantee you she's continued to do that because she still works there. I know she's moving into new spaces there. We still stay in touch. So that's another way how you experience that outside of the four walls of our container.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's like building a muscle, right? Like you got to start somewhere and then you get more comfortable or more courageous in the way that you're able to do it. And if someone is listening to this and they're like, okay, well, historically knowing the wealth gaps between leaders of color and white leaders, like how do you encourage people to have that conversation to advocate for themselves? Because everyone deserves the same pay, obviously. There has to be pay equity in the sector, and unfortunately there is not. There's a huge gap in pay, and especially between men and women and people of color. So how do you encourage people like her to advocate for what they're worth?
It's building, I think the program and having a supportive network starts that. It is hard. Like even with myself, I find myself not always advocating. So like I've done some conferences and whatnot. Some are paid, some aren't. Some of the ones that are not paid, I think it's important that you look for creative compensation opportunities. And sometimes I won't do that. And so I get encouraged when I see people, whether they're in particularly if they're in the ALC program, those two stories I just shared, they empower me. And so it's not easy, but if you have the right supportive network, if you have the right strategies of who to talk with, how to talk with, all of those pieces, I think it's helpful. So to me, it just boils down to having a supportive network that then helps you become more of an advocate for yourself. I don't feel like we can do anything alone. I have a person who pushes me almost on the daily and sends me stuff because she believes in For the Hood. And I absolutely need that because there are going to be some days where I'm not feeling up to my best or feeling frustrated or feeling just down or whatever. And having people in your network who are actively looking for opportunities for you, it's amazing. I think I can pivot really quick, Haley, to say this quickly because I believe I told you this. I posted something on LinkedIn I'd say about a month ago where For the Hood, first 12 weeks out of the gate, it was beautiful. I knew there was going to be some slow times and it happened. And in that slow time, which was, I think it started at the beginning of June, it was really hard because it lasted for a month and a half. And I decided to reach out to my network on LinkedIn and to my friends and just said, hey, here's how I'm feeling. I'm like, I knew this was going to happen. I said, I know I'm in a funk. I said, I'm trying to move through this. I said, and essentially, I think I don't know if I directly asked for people to reach out, but they did. And they offered different kinds of stuff that I needed. Some offered just me to vent or just be supportive. Some gave me connections to other people, and others gave me ideas on how to collaborate or strategize or find new revenue streams. And over the last week, 2 weeks, people they're still sending me stuff. And I'm just like, I feel blessed. And so that to me best answers your question. If you're trying to advocate, whether it's pay salary or whatever, if you've got a good network of support that can help even have you review things or put things together, if you're going to go to your boss and advocate for something, have somebody help you draft like, well, why? What are the reasons? That's what I feel is happening with my network. And I love my network. And I wouldn't even call them that because network, sometimes I don't like that word, but it's my circle. I love my circle, and my circle is always showing up for me.
Yeah, I think obviously in your career, skills and expertise matter, but I think your network or your circle or whatever you want to call it matters more. I've gotten into positions because I've known someone in the organization or have had good recommendations. And so I think that's so important. And also the hardest part is to ask, right? To show that you need help. A lot of people see that as a weakness of, oh, I can't do this. I have to figure all of this out on my own. I should be able to do this on my own. That's what's expected of me. And to ask for help is so courageous. And when you do, honestly, people respect it more than you think they will because they will want to help you.
We haven't even hit on this word, Haley, but vulnerability. I think that is a constant word that comes out of ascending leaders is that people are being vulnerable, and we need to do that. And me as a male, when I came out of that job in the summer 2020, I was scared. I didn't know where to turn, and I chose to be vulnerable. And that has only helped me build upon the relationships that I had, create new ones, and to see where I am now. I mean, For the Hood didn't even exist before 22. And just to see where it's gone now and people really connecting to the work really makes me happy. And it's all because of that circle.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you've talked a lot about how one of the core pillars of your program is helping people experience more joy or regain joy in their life. What does that look like for you?
Oh, such a good question. And I will be as brief as I can because I know I can sometimes just go off on tangents. But I will start with like my focus. I am a man, and a lot of the men tend to view their main identity as their work. And I absolutely felt like that. And so I come into this space of out of a divorce. Now I really want to move into leadership. Then I start at this nonprofit as the CEO. 3 years later, it doesn't end as I wanted it to. And so you struggle through those pieces. And then you recognize, well, I don't want this. And I should say this as well. I had just gotten out of a relationship too. So I started to pour all my hours into work since I was out of that relationship. So seeking balance, finding balance is where I find my joy. I love to travel. I love to experience new restaurants. I love to play basketball. I love movies. I love just being with my current partner right now. That brings me joy. So she loves to do entertainment. She loves to do all of these things, and to experience that with her brings me joy. And I'm very conscious of ensuring that I have that balance. Yes, I've got to grow my business, but I don't want it to be at the expense of building relationships. So what else I've learned through this process is when I was at my day job, I had a lot of meetings with my friends, my circle. I want to say first 12 weeks, I didn't have as many. And then when it got slow, I was like, Frank, this is your opportunity. Go reach out to your friends. So I've really been conscious of that over the last 4 weeks, that I have at least 1 or 2 meetings with my circle so that we can reconnect. But more importantly, how can we support one another in each of our roles? And that's what brings me joy, is the relationships that I have and being able to just do fun things with the folks that are really important to me.
Yeah. And I feel like when you hear this, like when people are on their deathbed, they don't say they wish they would have worked more.
Right.
They wish they would have spent more time with their family or their loved ones. And that's what continues to drive our purpose, is the relationships that we have. And if you could envision the next year for the Hood, what would success look like for you and the communities you serve?
Again, a great question. One, and it's always going to be the goal, is to expand Ascending Leaders in Color. 6 of the 7 cohorts were in Pima County and in person. I had one that was virtual, and a mutual friend that you and I know, Deanna Farias Heinrich, was a part of that. And I want to expand the program nationally. There is a need for it everywhere. And having the ability to bring these circles using the restorative circle process, a lot of people have said, exiting Ascending Leaders, that it was life-changing for them. They've done major job shifts and job switches because they realized maybe their current employer wasn't perfectly aligned with their values. And so they're like, I need to move into this space. So number one, above all, I would love to see that expand. Number 2, I do enjoy spreading the message of the work that I do. I don't feel like I necessarily need to be on stage. I do feel comfortable on stage. So getting more keynote opportunities to spread just what we've said on this podcast of how I envision us working together, collaborating, healing separately, but leading collectively. I want to spread that more and more so that people have the tools and resources to do that in each of wherever I'm presenting. I would love to see those 2 things kind of expand, Ascending Leaders and opportunities to present across the nation to audiences who really want and would connect to the message.
Well, if people want to learn more about the work that you do, where can they find you?
Oh, easy. forthehood.com. That's the number 4, DAHOOD.com. Find me on LinkedIn. I think it literally is Frank Velásquez Jr. So again, you'll see that on the notes. But yeah, find me there. I always love to connect. I feel like I'm a relational person. I will always give time for any type of need that anybody has. If you feel, even if you're not a person of color, please reach out. I definitely feel like I have a lens that's super helpful and super relational. So that's where they can find me.
Amazing. We will make sure to link to all of that in the show notes. Well, thank you so much, Frank, for this conversation. It's truly been a joy to connect again.
I know. Thank you, Haley. And I'm looking forward to connecting with you again and again and again.
Hey, before you go, want to watch? Yes, watch the best moments from the Lead with Heart episodes? We're sharing the most powerful highlights and takeaways over on our brand new YouTube channel. Yes, we are on YouTube. Just search for The Savvy Fundraiser on YouTube and hit subscribe so you never miss a moment of insight and inspiration. The link is in the show notes as well. Thanks for listening, and as always, keep leading with heart.